In my life review, I watched my Heavenly Mother pass me through the cloud into my mother's hands and entrusting her in taking care of me. Can you imagine you giving one of your children to someone else and entrusting them to take care of you, nurture you, feed you, you know, teach you the ways to live? Can you imagine how hard that would be? And, and I witnessed watching her hand me to my mother.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am
living God's light.
My experience started up on the ski slopes. We were up at Park City. And to give you a little background before we went to Park City, my goal was to make money. It was all about making money. My background is that I came from a broken family, and I know what it's like to live on the streets and to be hungry. And I was not going to have that happen to my wife and family. And so I took it one step further. I had decided by the time I was 32 years old, and I was 28 at the time, that I was going to be a millionaire, and I was right on track, and I was going to be not working for the rest of my life. And we were very close to that point. But I realized from my experience that there was more to life than just money and fame and gain. Now, I played college baseball. I played professional basketball over in Europe. And so I was used to having people kind of cater to you a little bit. But when you get out into the real world, you got to work hard to get what you want in life. And so I'd been working out in Jackpot on an assignment. I worked for the Postal Service, and I came home at Christmas time, and I hadn't been home. Well, I guess it was probably going on 6 weeks because the weather out there wasn't very good in Jackpot. And if you don't know where that's at, it's between Wells and Twin Falls. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. But I came home, celebrated a good Christmas. I had won two $250 jackpots and a $700 jackpot out there in Jackpot, Nevada at Cactus Pete's. And so we celebrated and had a very good Christmas. Well, after being home so long, I called a friend of mine and said, let's go skiing. And because I love to ski, there is nothing like putting those first tracks down in that powder and hitting the slopes. We went up, I called a friend of mine who was an EMT, and I said, hey, we got to hit the slopes. And so we went up there, and we took about, it's probably about 3 runs down the hill, and it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and we were standing in the lift line. And I remember this so vividly because it was like it was slow motion. Time in this life doesn't mean a lot to me because I know how to slow things down. And I remember seeing this lady coming down the hill as we were in the lift line, and we were bragging about our jumps and our turns and hitting the moguls. But yet I can still remember seeing her face, and she was in agony. Her poles were going every which way. And I remember she had a fur hat, and it was like a stacked cake on top. And she was dressed to the nines, and I guess she hadn't had a lot of experience skiing. But she came down and took out about 3 or 4 of us. And it was like a bowling ball coming at us. We were just the pins, and we got knocked over. And I remember picking her up and brushing the snow off of her and getting her poles for her and getting her one ski back on that she lost, and then letting her go on her way, not thinking any more about it. Well, we went and skied. My friend and I went and skied for the rest of the day and had a ball. And we skied down to the car, and back then you could actually just ski right out to your car. And I started taking my skis off, my boots off, and I took my left glove off, and I took my right glove off, and I put my hand up like this, and my thumb was hanging down along the edge of my wrist. And what had happened was when she hit us, it completely pulled my thumb out of the socket and it was just hanging by the skin. Now you wonder why I didn't feel that. Well, if you remember the gloves, they're pretty tight. And so it holds it in place. And back then, the gloves aren't made like they are today. It was cold. It was really cold. We skied in our overalls back then. It was not like the ski equipment that they have now. And I remember my friend who was an EMT at the time said, I can't fix that with a Band-Aid. We're going to have to get you to the hospital. And Park City is a little ways away from Provo. And so what we did is we went back into the ski resort because we didn't have cell phones then. And I called my wife and she made arrangements for the hospital so that when I got down to Provo, they could do the surgery. As you would expect, when the car started to warm up, my thumb and my hand really started to hurt. In playing sports, I learned how to handle pain and how to play through pain. And when you clear the mechanism in your head, you can separate yourself from your body. And I learned how to take myself to another place so that I would not feel the pain and I'd be able to finish playing the game. And I did that quite a few times going down the mountain because I felt like I was going to pass out. But I remember going into the hospital and my wife, bless her heart, she had arranged everything. They were ready for me. They were waiting for me. They got me into the room and they were prepping me to go in. And then they started to will me out into the operating room. And I'll never forget this because back then I was so selfish and so self-centered that I never told my wife that I loved her. It was just something that I never grew up with. We didn't have love in our home. And so I never told her I loved her. I never told her to tell the kids that I loved them. The only thing I said was I'll see you when I get back. And that is something that has stuck with me for 40 years. And I've tried to make that change in my life to tell her how important she is to me and how much I love her and the kids. When they wheeled me into the operating room, the anesthesiologist got called away. And that was the person that was supposed to inject me and to do to prep me for the operation. The doctor said, I know another procedure called bear block. And that's spelled BEIR block. And basically what it is to put a air tourniquet around your arm. You lift your arm up in the air, you drain the blood out of it, and then you tighten up the valves in that air tourniquet, and then you drop it and you put a local in your operating area, which is where my thumb was. I didn't think anything of it. I thought, okay, he knows what he's doing. We'll just keep on going. And I was laying on the table. They put a sheet between me and where he was operating. So I could hear them, what they were saying, because they did a local and he communicated with me. But I couldn't see what they were doing. As they did the local, I felt everything going in. It felt just fine. I felt comfortable. And I remember into the operation, I started feeling pressure down into my arm. And the doctor told the nurse, what you do is you undo one of the valves, but you leave one closed. And the reason for that is so that the medicine in your hand doesn't go up and cause problems into your body. Well, unfortunately, this nurse had never done this operation before. So she totally trusted the doctor, and the doctor, trusted her abilities. So he talked her through the operation. A little while longer into it, my arm started to hurt again. The pressure started building up. And what you're supposed to do is tighten up the first valve and then open the second valve. And unfortunately, she opened the second valve and didn't close the first valve. And I felt the medicine going up my arm, across my chest, and into my heart. And the next thing I knew, I watched myself leave my body and stand above and watch the operation. It was the most natural feeling. It was like, this is the way it's supposed to be. And I sat up there and watched the operation And then I realized someone was standing beside me. He was to the right of me, and I did not see his face. But what he did is he talked to me through my mind. Now I could hear everything going on down below audibly through my ears, but he talked to me through my mind. The nurse went running out of the room, and I'll never forget her saying, "I killed him. I killed him," as she went running out of the room. And I sat there above and looked at the equipment. I saw where I had flatlined. I witnessed where the tools were all laid out for the doctor. And I watched him as he was cutting my arm and taking a tendon out of it to wrap around my thumb. And I remember watching him put pins in my thumb. And I remember that this one pin was just a little bit too big. And he pulled the pin out and he cut it so that it wouldn't protrude through the skin. And I was impressed at what he was doing because I was watching him operate on me, where before being behind this sheet, I couldn't see what he was doing. And the person that was standing right next to me was impressed with what he was doing too. And as she ran out of the room, an emergency team come running in, and they put paddles on my chest and they cut my gown off of me, and they put little monitors all over my chest and on my body. And the most unusual thing was I looked over at the guy that was laying on the table and wondered why he was laying there. I didn't recognize it at first that it was me. And as I watched him, they pounded on my chest and putting those shockers on my chest. They kept talking to the guy that was overlaying on the table. And nothing, that flat line never changed. Then I looked over at the table and I went, boy, that guy looks kind of like me. And then realized that that was me. It was the most unusual feeling that I think I've ever had. As we stood there and watched the operation, I'm going to call him my guardian angel because that's what I feel like he is. I knew that voice. It was a very comforting voice as he talked to me through my mind. Then he said it was time to go. There was no question. There was no question. It was time for me to go. And the next thing I knew, I was standing in a field, and I was standing there. I wasn't by myself. The guardian angel this time was to the left of me, just out of my view, but talking to me through my mind. I knew he was there, and I know it was a man because I recognized the voice. He said to me that I was not allowed to look back again. I could look to the left, I could look to the right, I could look in front of me, but don't look back. And, you know, it was the most calming and peaceful surrounding that I have ever been in. To the far left of me were tall trees. I looked at those trees and they were beautiful. You know, you look at a trunk on a tree and they look so dirty. These trees were just the most brilliant browns with a gold trim or glimmer on it. And up above, the leaves were red, two different kinds of reds, different colors of greens, but underneath were gold color. I have been searching for these trees for the last 40 years, and a friend of mine, after I told him the story about the trees and I described it to him, says, well, those are baobab trees, and they're in Madagascar. And he said, do you know what the history of these trees are? And I said, no, I don't. Tell me, because I'm anxious to know. He says, well, in Madagascar, these trees are considered the tree of life because they're full of about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 gallons of water. And they sustain the people that live there during their drought season. Now, this made a lot of sense to me because being the tree of life, you know, why wouldn't I see something like that where I was at? But that one was a miracle and a very humbling experience to find out that I knew that tree and I could describe it, and he was able to show it to me. Now, to the To the right of the trees were flowers. They were the most beautiful flowers that I have ever seen. Colors that I have never seen before. They were so brilliant. It was something that when I had a lady paint this scene for me, I it was so hard to describe to her what I had seen. And all through the colors, I kept saying brighter, brighter, brighter. And she would say, I don't have paint that's that bright, but it's the colors that I saw. These flowers were all facing towards me. And when you look at a flower, you see petals in the middle. Oh, they were brilliant. And to be able to sit there and look at these petals, and I knew that every one of those flowers had a soul that was unbelievable, that was actually looking at me and communicating with me. Now, every one of these flowers were facing towards me. The leaves were all facing towards me. I did not have to walk around the flowers to see everything. They were all facing toward me. And the interesting part was they were leaning towards me. And I could actually feel the energy that was coming from every one of those flowers and the love that was coming from each one of those flowers. And it was a very, very special feeling. Now, in front of me and to the right was tall grass. Now, this grass was individual strands. They were green on the bottom, but the tips were gold. And again, each one of these strands of grass were flowing towards me, as if to show me their love and to show me that I was safe. It was, again, energy that they were giving off to me. And then there was a cloud in front of me. And it was like there were three clouds. The two side clouds were a pure white. And it's the way you would imagine a cloud as being pure white. But the middle one was a pearl color. And the only way I can describe it is when you look at a car that has a pearl finish and you see blues and blacks and purples, depending on the reflection of the light. Well, that's what I saw in that middle cloud. Behind the clouds were an iridescent blue. It was a blue that I had only seen in Puerto Rico when I went out to the waters where at nighttime you can see iridescent blue colors. And the best time to see those colors is on a clear night. Then I felt that person beside me gone. And you would think when you feel that, when you're not there with somebody, that you would feel a lot of anxiety, that you would feel alone. I was not alone. I did not feel like I was alone. It was the most calming, peaceful feeling, and something that I had never felt before, and that was love. That was pure, unconditional love. I also saw me getting drafted in the Army, and I was going in the Army to die, because that was the main focus on anyone going into the Vietnam War, is they were going over there to die. And while I was in the Army, a sergeant major took me under his arm and told me that I had a gift and asked me if I'd play for the base team in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I told him no twice. And the third time came to me, he said, "Soldier, I need you to know something. You are going to the front lines and I may not ever see you again." And I said, "I'll play basketball." But the rest of my unit went over to Vietnam, and I was one of three that came back alive because I did not go. I ended up going to Germany. Well, going through this life review, I was watching all this. Now, watching it, I'm going to put it in a way that it was not watching it through a video screen or on a big screen TV. I was living it in my mind. But everything that I lived, I was doing it through emotion, because I was living the other people's emotions. So the people that I worked for, that I stepped on, and getting higher and higher in the business world and making more and more and more money, I lived their emotions of what I did to them. Now, again, this was not a beat up time. it was a time where I had to learn. And it was learn, I was being taught with love, which was just so foreign to me that I just expected somebody to come along and just smack me in the side of the head and send me on my way wherever I was going next. I went back into my body. There was a war going inside of my body that I'd never experienced before, and that is that I did not want to go back. And when I went back into my body, I felt instant pain. I felt like I was being abandoned at first, but yet I knew that I had to learn more. It wasn't until the orderly walked in and put his clipboard on my chest, and I had a sheet over my head and I had a death certificate saying that I'd been dead for 20 minutes. He dropped the clipboard and I moved, and he said, "Doctor, I think you better come over here." And I witnessed the doctor taking off his scrubs. He'd been washing his hands, and he was really under a lot of distress because he was now going to have to tell my wife that he had lost me on the operating table. And I felt his emotions. It was the most interesting feeling because it's something that we here don't feel is other people's emotions when we're talking to them. My wife was out in the waiting room, and when she first went into the waiting room, it was full of people. And when I was brought out of the waiting room, she was the only one in there. And so when the doctor came over and they started wheeling me out into the hallway. They were taking me to the ICU because this wasn't natural. So I was going to be put in the ICU for 3 days. They wheeled me out, and the doctor walked over to my wife and said, "Everything's okay. We lost him, but we brought him back. But with a little bit of physical therapy, he's going to be just fine." My wife actually fell back into the chairs and just saw something totally different than what I saw. She she saw raising 3 kids by herself and losing her house and having to get a job and how she was going to support and how she was going to adjust losing me. For 3 days in the ICU, I felt total peace. It was something that was so pure, and it is something that I have worked hard to have ever since that day. I'm very fortunate to have that gift of peace because with the society and the world that we live in, you can really get wrapped up in what's going on around the world with all the wars and contention and, you know, unfortunately, the media is just, it's hard to understand. But one thing that I am able to do, and I'm fortunate having the gift that I was given, was to know that I'm going to be okay and that I am not afraid of dying. And that is the best feeling that you could ever have, is knowing that you're not afraid to die. In fact, 10 years after I had my experience, I was starting to go back into the same ways that I was before I had my experience. And I think a lot of that was because I could not process what I had seen and what I felt. I called a friend of mine, his wife, on the 14th of June. I'll never forget that. I had a baby boy, and my birthday was on the 15th. And so I called him and talked him into going golfing with me. And he says, "Well, really need to be there with my wife." And I said, "But it's my birthday tomorrow." And so I tucked him into going golfing with me. And he says, "Well, I think she could probably wait for a couple hours." And we were up on the golf course and we were on the third hole. And we looked over the valley and saw a storm coming in over the lake. And we both looked at each other and went, "We can make it. We're invincible. We can make it." And unfortunately, playing golf is not always fast if you're not golfing very well. But we were on the eighth hole, and I had just sunk a putt, and it was about a 40-footer, and I was just excited that I made this putt. And I said, "That's the best birthday present I've ever had." And all of a sudden, the hair on my arms and the back of my neck started going up and started feeling really strange in my body. And I got hit by lightning. My friend Frank got hit by lightning. And I got knocked off the green, and it was a total whiteout. And the first thing that came to my mind was, I got it. I got it. This isn't going to happen again. I got it. And I never got checked out after that. But my friend Frank did not fare as well as I did. His L4, L5 melted together from the heat from the lightning strike that hit us both. And I went down to the car, and Frank weighs 300 pounds, and he played lineman for the University of Florida, and about 6'4", so he was not a small guy. Went down to the car and brought the car up on the green and loaded him up and took him to the hospital. And Frank was up in the ICU, and his wife was down on the third floor in maternity. And I had to go down and explain to his wife what happened to her husband. And I'll never forget the emotions that I felt in telling his wife that I talked him into going golfing with me and what happened to him. Now, Frank went through about 5 surgeries on his back and was never the same after, and never was able to play golf again after that. I haven't talked much about this, but I know the reason why it happened was to teach me a lesson. And the lessons I had to learn was patience. I had to learn how to love. I needed to learn how to be kind to others and to also be aware of other people's emotions. You know, we're here for a reason. We're here to learn. And I know why I was sent back. I had to learn more. And it was a gift, I feel like, to come back and to learn the right way. I know that I came from somewhere. I know I'm here to learn. And I know that where I'm going to be even learning more. And my intelligence, when I was standing up there, was opened. I saw things that was undescribable. And I still don't know how to describe it other than I look forward to going back and feeling that again.
Vinny, what was that like for you? I could see you reliving your
Yeah,
experiences. Scott
I
was talking
love,
about it.
I love listening to any experience I can. I really connect to the individual's experience of something I know as well, and I can see how it affects someone to go through that and to feel that, and each time I hear it, no matter what the experience is, I can feel the emotion of that, and the love coming through the experience is palpable. It's physical, and I could feel that as you were sharing it today. I love asking kind of some different questions about the experience, maybe something you haven't ever had asked to you before. But what do you think your favorite after effect and your least favorite after effect are? Because you're definitely a different guy afterwards, obviously, right? And not just the great Scott that you are. I feel like you've always been a great Scott, but you've gone through these many evolutions through all these experiences. And now all of your energies point towards what's really important to you, which is people, family, and love. And that's something common I find with everyone that has been through these experiences.
Well, Vinny, you know it's real. I mean, you can't deny it. You see it every day. I see it every day. And I know that if I deny that little voice that comes to me to do things, that little voice is going to be taken away from me. And
Yeah.
I can't let that happen because
That's
I
what keeps us alive.
that's what keeps us going. I saw the good, the bad, the black, the white. And I think it's important that we all learn those because we are sent here we have a gift to make our own choices, but we have to live by those choices. If they're good choices, you feel good about them. If they're bad choices, you go, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. But you have to learn from the good and the bad. We have failures in life. We have successes in life. And those are things that we just have to learn from. Yeah.
So, Scott, I've got a big question for you, a little bit of a
Sure.
change of tack. If you had one message, like one thing that you wanted to share with the world, if you had the chance to just have a microphone and talk to everybody on planet Earth, what would you tell them?
Don't look back at what you've done. Take where you are right now and step forward. You have the ability to make changes. You may have to change your lifestyle, and you may have to change the friends that you're running around with. But from that day on, from this time on, you find a way to make things better. And life is precious. It's precious. And I know how precious it is. But yet I also know how natural it is to go into the next life and not to be afraid. And I think in the next life, and I don't know about you, Vinny, but I noticed that my intelligence level went out of this, out of it was it about blew my mind what I was experiencing because I was using my mind a lot stronger than I do here. And it kind of makes sense that we only use just a portion of our mind here. But it was opened, wide open for me to see everything and to see brilliant, just brilliant things. I know it was a gift. I know it was a gift for me to see it and then to be sent back. Benny knows this, that probably about 75% of the people that are married that have an experience like this, their marriages don't last. Because when you get married, you're going parallel. You're just going right down the line together. And then all of a sudden you have an experience and you go, whoa, you're clear out here. And the person over here is trying to draw that person back. And when it doesn't happen, the marriages fall apart. And I'm going to be honest with you, our marriage almost did fall apart because I could not figure out what had happened to me and what direction I was supposed to go. But after I get hit by lightning, I knew exactly where I was supposed to be because that could have been my last day.
So, Scott, in that case, you described the just like having a quick turn, a whole different direction. How did that work with you and your wife? Did you like not go as hard that direction, or she came with you, or did you figure out a way to like rise together? What happened?
My wife, she's an angel, and Vinny knows this. He's met my wife.
Yep.
You know, I know that it was not by chance that I ran into my wife over in Germany. I told her I'd show her a good time when she came over. I was playing basketball. I was getting ready my goals was to get into the NBA, and I was programmed to get into the NBA. And I told her when she came over there, she came over to visit her sister. Her husband was in the army, that I would show her around. We, after 3 weeks, one thing led to another, and we decided we were going to get married after 3 weeks. And we came back to the States, got married, and shortly after that, I broke my ankles in the international championships in Belgium, and my basketball career was over. And I knew that I know that it wasn't by chance that she came into my life to nurture me and to coach me into moving into the next life. And what I'm talking about next life is getting into college, getting into education, and moving forward with our lives together. She came from a very, very good family, very, very religious family, and her faith was strong. And she taught me about faith. It was something that I'd always just depended on myself. But faith is so powerful, and prayers are so powerful.
We have one last question we'd like to ask you, and that is, how is Scott living God's light?
That's such a humbling question because we have to get out of our way of ourselves in order to live God's light. We have to depend on his light because that's all there is that light. When you mix all the colors together that are here on the earth, it turns out white. And that tells me a lot about this earth. It's light. And God is our light. Christ is our light. And what a gift that is to have that light.
Thank you for expanding your light today. If you want to find more information, get connected to our community, or simply contribute, see our website at livinggodslight.org. As always, please subscribe.